Well, you got me working so hard lately, working my hands until they bleed. If I was twice the man I could be, I'd still be half of what you need. All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Thank you for being here. Today, we are going to talk about 9 Inch Nails, specifically 2 albums, Pretty Hate Machine and Downward Spiral. I chose these 2 albums because they are meaningful to me in terms of memories, and I wanted to go back and listen to them and see what I thought and hopefully hear what you guys think. So, pull them back up, stream them again, or for the first time if you haven't heard it. Let it all wash over you. And let's talk about it. These 2 albums are very well known and well listened to for me, so it's a matter of, I'd say, 2 different perspectives. One being initial in the moment as a teenager when they came out. Pretty Hate Machine was released on October 20th, 1989, and Downward Spiral was released on March 8th, 1994, and now as an adult and engineer listening again. So I have both memories and analysis. Today, I am wearing an outfit for this video that I thought would be Trent approved. We have square wave, sine wave, triangle wave, sawtooth wave on my shirt. If you know, you know. I've got the leather wrist cuffs, and I've got some very tight leggings going on and a choker. I like to, get into the spirit of things. One thing I wanted to do with these albums to begin with is to go into this not knowing or reading anything. So no interviews, no other reactions or analysis, nothing about what Trent has said, because he's still alive and creating. Nothing about what other people have commented, just zero research before we started. Trent has done so many interviews, I'm sure, over 30 plus years of exactly how all of this was made and every little thing that he's done and how he felt about it and everything. So I want to kind of know nothing so that I can have my own opinions and reactions in what I hear now as an engineer and whatever came up in my own memories. And I hope to hear what other people experienced with these 2 albums as well. Where I think and where I hope my analysis will be different is I hope to explain in a simple and general way about how electronic music can be made, because you can do it too. And I'm not going on the assumption that my audience knows anything. You guys know this is my goal here, to break it down and to not lose the average person while doing so. So we're going to talk about the album sound in general, the subject matter, the feelings. We're going to go deeper into album by album, and this could be quite a long video because I have many, many thoughts and feelings about all this subject matter, and I'm super excited to talk about it today. The first thing that I noticed when listening again, and am very appreciative of, is if I didn't know that this was Trent or what this was, I would say, just blindly knowing nothing, an audiophile made this. Somebody knew what they were doing. They knew how to use samples creatively, how to use drum machines, how to play multiple real instruments, also in addition to electronic, and how to have everything organized exactly as they want it. I'd also say the delivery of the performance and the vocals is excellent. I think it's funny because Trent in general and 9 Inch Nails is something that people like, at least back in the day, they would subtly kind of want to rip on because the delivery is so overly emotional, and it really crosses over into almost being cheesy. I mean, it certainly rides that line, but they're fooling themselves and they're lying to everyone else too, because it isn't cheesy. And when you put this album on and you really feel those feelings, you know. And like, it wasn't even haters back in the day. It was really people that admire him and like love and respect him and his abilities. It was jealousy, I feel, like remembering people say stuff like that, mainly because you're just, I mean, it's natural, like to be slightly jealous when you listen to the way that all of the samples are very carefully placed and they're manipulated in a way that only a pro audio engineer would know how to do. You can't help being in awe of it and slightly jealous. And most people don't want to admit that. I think it was just low hanging fruit to sort of like try to act like you were unimpressed by it. But I think over time, obviously, Trent has proven himself to be undeniable. That's the thing. You almost want his material to be cheesy so you can deny those uncomfortable feelings he has the courage to sing about. When you actually listen to his albums and you get into that moment and that feeling, it's all of the feelings that you as an adult are pushing to the side and denying or numbing or just plain don't feel anymore. It's these things that we may not have access to anymore, that as a teenager, when things are more raw and real and kind of right on the surface, you do. But as an adult, they're still in there. They're still in there somewhere. Like every day you go around town, you're not screaming about things being a terrible lie. Or maybe you are. Who knows? However, these albums, Pretty Hate Machine and Downward Spiral, still ring true because they access those universal, uncomfortable feelings for every generation, from teenagers to adults. And most importantly, the initiation of the transference of those feelings and the understanding of them as a listening experience is something that's not just done through lyrics and the emotional delivery of a vocal. It's through entire created soundscapes of music that bring you into those moments too. So I wanted to look up and try to find some good adjectives to describe Trent's music, because for me, it's just the way my brain works. I have trouble putting my feelings into words. They more like come through in sounds to me. Like it's something I'm working on for this project to be able to speak more clearly, because like I can talk a lot, but it's a conscious effort to get to the point. And the point is more like sounds in my brain that feelings feel. So what I did in this case is I had ChatGPT make a list of descriptors, and it's really good. So here is ChatGPT's list, and what I'd say are examples of what Nine Inch Nails sound is in general. Self-abnegation, deliberate denial or negation of one's own worth or needs. Self-flagellation, punishing oneself emotionally, often used metaphorically. Internalized shame, absorbing negative judgments and living from them. Negative self-schema, identifying as the flaw rather than having one. Learned helplessness, accepting I'm bad and broken as mutable. Morbid self-romanticization, turning your flaws and pain into an identity or aesthetic. Melancholic indulgence, lingering in sadness or inadequacy by choice. Wounded identity, defining the self through damage. Tragic self-mythologizing, casting yourself as the doomed or fallen figure. Self-condemnation, not just guilt, but sentencing yourself. Existential resignation. This is what I am, and I accept it. Negative self-acceptance, embracing the badness rather than fighting it. Voluntary abasement, choosing the lowered position. Eroticized shame, submission to self-judgment, ritualized self-humiliation, and the most current internet slang it could come up with for all of you out there, owning the rot, which I love that. Like, can that be the name of my next album? Owning the rot. So given all this, there's a larger, more philosophical question of, when you feel the pain is defining you, are you coming from a place of subconscious allowance, or does this actually put blame on the victim? But who knows for Trent? I could say from my own experience that at the times, if emotional pain was something I couldn't get away from, at some point you just throw up your hands and say, all right, let it in. We're going to be friends now. I'm going to talk about you. I'm going to sing about you. I'm going to love you and this sick that you made me. And you know what? You kind of even turned me on. Because allowance can lead to some really dark places, and dark places are exciting. Which brings us to BDSM themes in the music. So this brings us to a larger theme of bondage, sadomasochism, rolling throughout Trent's music, which as a teenager was hot, and as an adult is still hot. As a teenager, as a memory, you know how some people say there was a moment in their adolescence that sort of defined their sexuality? For me, I had been questioning. I had some girl crushes. Am I into women or men or both? And I tell you, the moment I saw Trent in leather pants spinning around, hanging from the ceiling in the video for Closer, I was like, oh yeah, I am straight. And that image lives rent-free in my head 30 years later. As an adult listening back to these albums, I have an even deeper appreciation for the sexual themes now as a woman in terms of power dynamic. In terms of being sexual in subject matter, you have a type of sexual that can be more machismo and be degrading to women. Like, if there's absolutely no subtlety about it, like some 70s classic rock, for example, where it's like, hey, baby, I'm going to take you on a ride. And some of this stuff is like, you're very clearly, either the predator or the prey in this situation. And men are like, look at my big guitar, baby. I'm going to wave it all around. And I'm thinking, okay, well, then who am I in this scenario? Like, where is my guitar? But with Trent, since he has more of a BDSM feel to it, it doesn't make you on one side of the coin or the other. I laughed about this later when I read this back. He hates himself just as much as he could degrade any woman. And he's questioning and blaming himself. So not only, no matter what gender you are, you can see yourself in either role. So therein lies the power. The BDSM flavor, I think, tends to humanize people more in a way, because you're saying, no, you are powerful. You can hurt me emotionally, and you have. Rather than like being some caveman knocking a woman over the head with your guitar and like dragging her off with you. Which, to each their own. I mean, that can be hot too. But this is real. This is real and intense. And I have respect for intensity because I am intense. And if you like this music out there, you are probably a little intense too. So now that we've set this scene in terms of themes, it's like, well, how would you turn that all into sounds? What we want is the audio version of your thoughts and feelings. We want to create an entire immersive soundscape where the listener is engulfed in those feelings. Or, like, who knows the motivation Maybe for Trent, it wasn't so purposefully contrived in that way. He just created his art, and that's what came out because that's what he was into. But let's nerd out a little bit and get into the technical creation of these albums. I'll go really, really simple and go over some ways you can, and he did, create some of this type of electronic music. And the cool thing is, you can do this too. All it takes is a solid baseline of audio fundamentals, which, shameless self-promotion, I'm going to teach you if you want. I have some lessons coming up that I'm in the works of making. And it takes an open imagination for creativity. These days, and I'm recording this in 2026, with computers, we have endless possibilities for sound manipulation. I mean, endless. In every parameter your mind can think of, tonally, spatially, volume-wise, etc. And it's almost even more difficult because the possibilities are endless, so it's almost like overwhelming to have so many choices. What makes Trent's creation of these albums at the time he made them is that this was the late 80s, early 90s, so he naturally had more technological limitations. But what's great about audio and sound is the fundamentals are always the same. You go back to basics, and you always know what you're doing no matter what you're using. So, song construction in electronic music. Let's get into it. I could talk about this stuff in extreme detail for hours. MIDI, envelopes, sine waves, oscillators, etc. But I don't want to lose people, so I'm going to try to keep it as light and general as possible. The way to think about these songs is in layers. One thing is laid down as the foundation, then another sound is added, then another, and then something is taken away, then little sprinkles of sound over the top. So, first, think about your drum beat, right? A live, traditional, simple drum kit has a kick drum, a snare drum, a floor tom, a rack tom, a hi-hat, and then some bigger cymbals. So you can think about each drum and cymbal having its own sound. Even with a live acoustic drum kit, each drum can sound different. Like, not all kick drums sound the same. Kick drum A and kick drum B could have a vastly different sound to them. And you can make them sound different. And with electronic drum samples, you can make them very different. So you're still occupying that kick drum beat in the way that it would be, but maybe now you want it to sound like a heartbeat instead, for example. So then you think about your snare drum. Maybe you want that one to sound like a whip, in keeping with the theme. So we're manipulating the original sounds to sound vastly different, but still make a beat. So what is a sample exactly? It's just a little digital file. It gets triggered to play when it's told to. So there's an action, like pressing a button, then the sample plays, and you hear the sound. So think of like a child's toy. You press the button, the cow says moo. You have just triggered a sample of a moo sound to play. So in this case, your sample could be a little digital file of a kick drum sound or a snare. And then you can add something to that sound in order to change it further. Or maybe you just want to go out and record the sound of a whip and use that just like it is as your snare sound. Whatever you want that sound to be, you decide, and then you place it repetitively in time to make that beat. So how do you change these little sounds? And how do you place them? Let's talk about placing it first. Basically, you need a drum beat recorded in time. These days, you can use software like Logic Pro, Pro Tools, Ableton, whatever you'd like to get that beat playing in time. You can have it on a loop, so it just keeps repeating, just like a live drummer plays the same beat throughout a song. Prior to this, engineers could use little drum machines to make their beats and record them onto reel-to-reel tape machines. Just a little box that plays the samples. You go out of the box into the tape machines and record these samples playing. I'm sure you could still do that. But how do you change the sound for each drum, for example, to what you want it to be? Well, there are different ways you can do that as well. 1, have it already recorded exactly as you want it. This is our whip sound used as a snare. 2, use a pre-programmed snare sound. The machines came with snare sounds. The software now comes with basic snare sounds. You could choose one and do nothing to it, but use it. 3, take a pre-programmed sound or a pre-recorded sound and change it further.
Take a reprogrammed sound for pre-recorded sound and change it further.
No, stop talking. Okay, so that's layer 1. You have each drum come in, drop out, drop the whole kit out to silence, whatever you like, however you want to build it. And this is how the beat builds in EDM. Kick, then the snare is added, then the hi-hat, and it continues to build, usually, So starting there, Trent is into the BDSM type stuff, and he was going for drum beats that sounded like that. He chose them or he made them like that. And they do. So now he places full beats or individual drums or sounds acting as a drum beat wherever he wants to throughout the song. So what else could we add to this, right? So that's layer 1. Layer 2, you're going to start thinking about what we can add. They could be chords added to that on top. Held out sustained chords, chord progressions, drone sounds, atmospheric swells, something filling the space with noise, or not. You can choose to use any of this or not at any moment. And how do you choose that to sound? Like a buzzing feeling of dread? More like a church organ? You can choose however you want these things to sound. Then when you think about layer 3, in no particular order, layer 3 could be a bass line. How do you want to create that bass line? Do you want a keyboard to play lower notes? Do you want an actual bass guitar? Do you want more samples to make up that component? So you can decide there too. Now, layer 4 can be more melodic pieces, like little guitar fills, a keyboard part playing a melody over the top of everything, anything. You can bring in a flute and a kazoo. You can do whatever you want. And what you can do is play actual pure live instruments in addition to any computerized manipulations. So you've got a good mixture of something live, like an electric guitar or a bass guitar or any acoustic instrument you can think of, paired with a lot of computerized instruments or sounds or beats. And this is actually, I've used this before. It can be used to make it not sound 100% fake and machine-like. It adds a lot of good live, real coloration to the song that takes away from the straight, cheesy 80s computers and really makes it come to life. Because like in the 80s, when all of the computerized things and keyboards first started to come out, they really went hard with it. Because they were like, this is cool technology. We will only use this. And so, that's when you get some of those sounds that sound, the technology was limited too, so it sounded faker, but it really brings it to life when you compare electronic instruments with live ones. So Trent has added some live guitars to his music and whatever else he wants to at any point as well. So then another layer, you can add your vocal. What Trent does so well, in addition to all this creative audio engineering, is a simple, well delivered vocal. And that's where his projects really come to life. His vocal is well performed and intense. He has excellent lyrics that really use all the adjectives of self-defacing. They play into the emotions that he's feeling in the moment, but also that his audience is going to be feeling because they're right there with him. The sound set the scene of the feeling, and the lyrics and the style he performs them really spell out in words now what he's feeling too. And the way he illustrates his feelings is very creative, in a way that you're right on the edge of something, of anger, of self-blame, of hatred, of wanting to give up, but like not in the way of totally depressed and wanting to off yourself, because like that's too on the nose. That's crossing a line into where you don't want to be. I mean, we can all relate to being right on that edge. To add another, and of course, never final layer, you can add one shot, little sprinkles of singular short samples over the top of the entire song, like little pieces of sound, anywhere you want to. And they could also be anything. Repeated farm animal noises, water splashing, punching sounds, keys jingling, babies crying, doors slamming, anything you could think of. You can sprinkle anywhere and make it sound however you want. They can be manipulated to be almost recognizable or however you want them to be. The great thing about audio is every little sound you use can have the variables changed on everything. Tempo, frequency, volume, spatial placement such as panning, effects added like reverb, delay, distortion. You literally can change everything in every way. These days, it is endless. It's literally endless because computers allow for the change variables to the smallest increments, even smaller than maybe your ears can perceive. But what made Pretty Hate Machine and the Downward Spiral so groundbreaking and genius at the time they were made is that the technology wasn't certainly what it is now, and Trent's creativity still reigned. What Trent did with these albums is very similar to when you give a child the giant crayon box with like 128 crayons in it, and they're somehow able to create this huge coloring that uses like every single crayon in every way, even the ones at the back of the box that are kind of like broken and like shouldn't be anywhere. He's put these little licks of them here and there where you least expect it. And so if you can listen to this album without singing along, good luck. You also can notice all these little nuances that are in there in the background. Very subtle, sometimes quieter little pieces that are put together to make this full soundscape. And this is why Trent got so much recognition, because as an engineer, you know what it takes to do something like that. And it's really the height of creativity. And it's like, also, man, I can imagine so fun, most importantly. Like you're given every piece of a puzzle and you're putting it exactly in every place that you want it to be, and you're just being so creative and having fun with it. And to me, I mean, it's really inspiring. Like it makes me want to make an album like this, like with samplers and synths and drum machines and vocals on top of it. Like just because, how much fun would that be just to play around? Like so fun. I will say, as a personal experience, when I was in school for audio, I had the opportunity to play around with one of Trent's Pro Tools sessions from a song during the mid-2000s with Teeth era. So I got to solo and listen to every little piece of the song on its own, the vocal by itself, the beat, the synths by themselves. Of course, it sounded amazing, but most importantly, all he's doing is using the tools that he has. Like, not to diminish what he does, but just to say the tools are there. All you have to do is know how to use them, and then you can just play around. And I much rather be using computers and music as a release of those more difficult emotions than some sort of vice. So let's get into the individual albums themselves, and we're going to start with Pretty Hate Machine. And it is the greatest, awesomest BDSM anthem sing along album that has ever been made. All the lyrics are perfectly understandable, they're memorizable, and it's just like any sort of sing along song that somebody would join in on, like Taylor Swift's Love Story or Tom Petty's Won't Back Down. It's easy to join with the melody. Pretty Hate Machine is no different than these songs, except it's an entire album of sing alongs, like every freaking song. Especially when it goes into what back in the day would have been side 2 of the cassette. That side is just filled top to bottom with classic self-hating sing-along songs that if you were with somebody in a car driving on a road trip and you were both like singing it together, you would be smiling and laughing and pointing at each other and like singing every song and like singing into the mirror and pointing at other cars and then like singing at them and like just having a freaking blast. But also, on the other side of the coin with this album, if you're at home and you're alone and you're just listening to it as well, it still rings true on a totally personal level. Like you're able to feel those emotions in a more serious manner, and you can feel it right along with him. So it can be for social settings, laughing, and for a serious and angry alone time setting. It really translates both ways. Another awesome thing about the sing along is that you don't actually have to be able to sing to scream along to this album. For example, some albums, if you're trying to imitate a great vocal performance and you're not the best singer, it's like, okay, you're not going to get anywhere near that album's performance. Trent has a great voice, but it's not like he's doing massive opera scales or something. You can scream along or speak along to it. All these songs are very clear, easy to remember, and understandable lyrics, and you can just scream along the whole time. And song by song, Head Like a Hole is like a rocking opener, alternative hard rock radio sing-along song that's going to get everybody to buy and listen to the album. And then with Terrible Lie, you go deeper into it, where everybody at in the South at the time was like, did he just say God was a terrible lie? Blasphemy. So like when you're yelling along to that, you can feel even more rebellious. And then the third song, Down in It, I remember everybody at the time back in the day was like, this is about ketamine, which they called Special K. And it's about being in a K-hole, which was like not socially acceptable as a medical treatment at the time. So you felt like you sort of like knew the secret when you were listening to the song too. And then Something I Can Never Have takes the mood down. And it was like your classic sad teenage self-hating bedroom song. The pianos, the slow singing, the emotions, like, oh my God, how many of us listened and cried to that song back in the day? And then we get into the second side of the cassette, and the whole thing is just straight sing along. Another thing I realized about the last song, Ring Finger, was I was yesterday years old after 30 plus years when I discovered that song might have a very sexual triple entendre that I never really thought about. So that was hilarious to me listening back as an adult. And even now, like I can find another layer after all this time. So does it stand the test of time? Absolutely. Never gets old? Could be a desert island album. there's going to have to be many albums on the island, but like, yeah, that could be in the discography of Desert Island for sure. So let's go into Downward Spiral now. I feel like I'm going to run out of adjectives to talk about this album specifically because, as a memory, this album came out when I was 15. And I can't even describe how many times I've listened to this thing. It was great. It's also one of the greatest albums ever made. It just is a complete paint box of like every audio trick in the book. But at the time when it came out, I didn't even know that because I didn't really know about audio specifically and what was happening here. I just knew as a whole package how it made me feel. And of course, I was like right at that age whenever I could get it. But you could be any age, really. This album just seeps into your blood. It's a whole soundscape of horrible, twisted feelings and like the best resignation to those darker feelings. This album has been celebrated so many times. I don't know if I could say anything new about it that hasn't already been said, because I'm sure countless articles have picked it apart in every little way possible. But I'll try to do it justice in my way. This album, Downward Spiral, takes a departure from something you could sing along to with Pretty Hate Machine and laugh at if you wanted, into a total all-encompassing audio experience. There's really no sort of out in this listening. You have to want to be in this mindset to listen to this, because if you aren't, you're going to be put there. Pretty Hate Machine is a genius album, but you can tell when listening to it that it's one person just doing their best by themselves, maybe being very, very creative with their crayons. But in Downward Spiral, though, we've graduated to a new level of pro audio and song construction, so let's talk about why. In terms of song structure and audio placement, Pretty Hate Machine has pretty standard layouts in the songs, which is what makes it so simple and perfect. But it's like verse, bridge, chorus, all of that. You know how it's going to go, and it's all in your face. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's awesome. But Downward Spiral not only seeks to get away from that sort of predictable plotting from like one bar to the next, but also sound-wise, it serves up a sense of slight disorientation when you listen to it, which I believe is purposeful. I would imagine so. I believe because it seeks to mimic the disorientation of the feelings of grief and anger that it contains. Let's talk about my first listen back to it. When I first put it back on, even right from the beginning, I could feel the album as it came in, making me just feel like nauseated, but in a good way. It makes like my entire solar plexus, like upper ab area, tighten up and like twist in the same way that it felt when I was young. And I know like I'm about to be on this journey inward, and it's not gonna be good. I instantly felt this surge of like excitement and dread, and like something was coming that was scary but also sexual. I mean, I listened to it all the time being young. So, those feelings that came up could be a reflection of like having memories of my own self-destruction. Also, I was listening to it at that age, but I still am transported right back to being that age instantly and feeling those exact same feelings. It speaks again to all those underlying emotions that none of us as adults face anymore. It takes you into that moment, and right from the first track, when it hits you in the face as it comes in, and then it drops out during another section of it, those heavy guitars drop out and turn into a little piano part with the softer singing. You just know that this is something that's the full package and professional and great, because the changes in the songs like that are unexpected. I think I understand this album a lot better as an adult than I did when I was young. or maybe not better, but like in a very completely different way than when I was a teenager. As a teenager, I understood it as the pain that I was in at the moment. It was exactly mirroring and reflecting all those different emotions that I felt on the path of my own destruction. So it was almost like a soundtrack of enabling in a way. It reinforced and echoed all those extreme feelings that I was feeling, and I could listen to it and be like, yep, that's exactly it. But now, as an adult listening to it, I feel a lot more life experience that I can reflect on whenever I listen. Looking back at every shade and level of emotion and being able to identify many different scenarios that I've been through. At first, I tried to listen to this album in my little headphone earpods for my phone. Sorry. And immediately I knew this album deserves to be listened to in its full-fledged glory with headphones surrounding your entire ear so that you can listen to every little nuance and all of the bass content that's in there as well, and all the little samples and pieces that have been put in. It's just, this album is not a casual listen. You have to like feel it hit you in the chest in all of its capacity. So I listened in my car instead. My car has an awesome system as subs. I wanted to adequately reproduce all the frequencies that are there. But then I noticed something else when I did that. I was listening to this album streaming on YouTube Music, and there was something different about it than it was back in the day. Like, I don't think I was listening to a remastered version or remixed, I don't know, but it was distinctly different from what I remember. There were some parts, especially in the high mid frequencies, I would say around like 2 to 3K, that was more present back in the day. I'm not imagining this. I know. Whenever certain parts would come in back then, it would just hit you in the face with sound. It would like pummel you. And it's really lacking like that. I kept thinking as I listened, there's something missing. Like, what is missing that could have been taken away? It sounds very different, at least to me. And probably nobody else could actually tell that, I'm sure, or like may not remember. But okay, so what I did to try something else is I switched it to surround sound in my car. So most of the time, music sounds better in my car in stereo because music was mostly mixed to be in stereo. So putting things in surround generally is kind of like allocating frequencies like that are sort of unintended to be, because you can mix things into like a surround configuration on purpose. Like, you can purposely take frequencies in the software and place them exactly into what speaker that you would like them to be reproduced in. And this is generally done for movies. You know, you're going to have the panning, the subs, things coming, walking from behind you, and all that type of stuff. But for music, the standard is a stereo mix, left, right. But the interesting thing about Downward Spiral is that there's literally so much going on sound-wise in all these mixes that I actually, for the first time, put this in surround just to listen to it, and it sounds a lot better than it does in stereo because you can achieve a lot of the separation between the instruments by putting them in different speakers around you and separation in the frequencies. Like, I don't think that it was intended to be like that, you know. Trent, if you're listening, you tell me. I don't think it was purposely mixed into surround, so that was surprising and interesting. All right, audio analysis of this album. Listening to Downward Spiral these days as an engineer, I'll say, this is an audiophile's wet dream. And I couldn't have put that into words when I was younger, but now that as an adult I've done sound, I can listen to every little bit of this and have an idea of what's been done. For one thing, you have an entire range of dynamics, like in terms of volume, from extremely loud in your face, pummeling you, down to a whisper. Then in terms of frequency range, you've got all the little nuances of the very pleasant, high, trebly, clicking sort of sounds down to the deep bass parts of it too. And you have a whole range of all kinds of manipulated samples and ambient parts, as well as live instruments and live instruments that are different on each song too, different types of instruments. You've got all the standard Trent-like manipulated animal sounds, weird little bondage noises that have been modulated and synthesized, drum tracks that sound like bondage whips and all that stuff. Audio-wise, you've got a lot of little interludes of just noises and oscillating frequencies and samples and guitar parts. And sometimes a song will completely stop whenever you expect it to complete, like that 4/4 measure, but it'll just cut off in the middle and switch to something else. And what's awesome about it is you would think that that should be jarring in a bad way, but it's not. It all completely makes sense in the way that he put it together. As far as vocal delivery, too, I mean, we know Trent can do a great sort of belted / screamed vocal delivery. And he really went full out with that in Pretty Hate Machine in a loud manner. But in Downward Spiral, he does both loud delivery and also completely soft and restrained. It just shows another side of him that's completely professional range. It shows he's more versatile. And Trent has such a great mixture of electronic and live instruments on this album. Like we talked about doing that before, combining them. He's got electronic drum beats. He's got drums where each drum is manipulated. I think on the first song, if you listen to it, they're all the drums. They're all slightly behind the beat. The little shaker sound is slightly behind the beat. And then his vocal and the keyboard are really holding steady. So it creates the effect of subtle disorientation in that way. And it's really effective because there's a chance when you do that it could sound sloppy, but it doesn't. Another thing I love that Trent did with this album is he intentionally played with a lot of dynamics, that you have something super loud and super distorted and then instantly cut out into live instruments and whispering. So you have that contrast, and it's just like classical music. That's what I noted when I listened to it. Because a lot of times these days, people compress the shit out of everything, so that it's one continuous volume, that you lose a lot of those great dynamics in your music when you're turning your entire mix into a sausage and just constantly pummeling somebody's ears with it. So the contrast in dynamics is another thing that is A, awesome, and B, slightly disorienting. I think on purpose. I mean, you're in it, you're not in it. And you really feel the sort of breathlessness when it drops out and a tightening when it blasts back into your ears. Another thing he did on the Downward Spiral was also little bits of ear candy, very, very quiet sound effects on some parts. If you listen very closely to the beginning of Closer, for example, everybody remembers that classic drum beat as that song is starting out. If you remember, listen to it for the first time if you haven't. But if you really listen very closely, there's another very, very quiet little keyboard synth effect going on underneath. I love when engineers do stuff like this because you can get deeper and deeper into these layers as you listen more and more. And every time, you could continue to find something new. I want to talk specifically about the track A Warm Place going into the next track, Eraser. So we get to this track that is A Warm Place. It's totally atmospheric synth, keyboard, instrumental. And I was instantly transported right back when this came on. And I was 15 in my teenage bedroom sobbing along to this. It hits exactly the same as it did back then. It's just a beautiful soundscape that transports you right into that feeling of like being alone and desperate and feeling hopeless with the sound of it. And then it transitions into sound effects of like somebody blowing on something. It sounds like somebody's trying to like blow into an instrument, like just blow into the mouthpiece, but not making any audible sound with it. And then it comes in as a sample of people just like subtly humming. And then it goes full on Eraser when it turns into like an actual song, but it doesn't have any lyrics until the very end. It's more like hard rock industrial type of song with guitars. I mean, it's just genius. And, I noted, it's not genius because these things separately are difficult to do. It's the contrast of putting these three things together, one seamlessly back to back into another. You almost like still get the same range of emotions from like deep despair and sadness and hopelessness into sort of like disgust with life and everything that's happened. And I think that that's what's so great about this is that it's these range of emotions are all part of the same container. Like they're all part of the same whole. And I love that he was able to adequately express that. So what he basically did in Eraser is what we talked about. He gradually starts out layer by layer, adding at the beginning of Eraser different sound effects, different instruments, different synths and guitars and keyboards and those drums. Now I'm going to go out on a limb here when I listen to this. I think those drums are real. I don't think they're electronic. I think that's an actual drum kit. I could hear guitar parts coming in and like a little melody line. And then he's got, at least on the right channel, another guitar playing. And then he's got the constant humming of the voices and those layer up and layer up and layer up. And then he keeps adding so many layers like that you can pick out at certain points little bits of what you're focusing on, but it's an entire full soundscape of stuff. Now, the reason why, as an audio engineer, that this is so awesome and done so well is because normally the more things you add to a mix, the more crowded it gets. And then you get what's called masking, which is like frequencies on top of frequencies. And eventually it just gets too full. You can't really separate one from the other. And like, that was the point here. He filled it up, but there's only so much noise in terms of dynamic range is what we call it, that like digital, whatever you're doing digitally or tape can take. Like if you keep packing it in there, it either starts to hurt, like audibly hurt your ears, or nothing is discernible at all. And he pushed it to like right to the edge with that because he does it in a way that doesn't hurt your ears, like in a way that it feels like it's all the noise in your brain. That's what I noted when I listened to it. I'm like, I get it. This is what you're creating right here. And I can see why he did that, and it's awesome. And just when it gets to the point with the layers that you cannot take it anymore, boom, it drops out and it's just as vocal. And actual real instruments and that little bitty shaker of a drum beat. Nothing crazy, nothing heavy, and he's softly, slowly singing. And it's disorienting in a way because, again, you're being pummeled and then all of a sudden you're not. But as an adult, when I listen, I feel my thoughts on it are that's how the shades of grief go. And what he's singing and saying in Eraser, he's describing the phases like he's listing them. He's lamenting what has happened and then he takes the same sort of vocal line and he takes the guitars up into crazy distorted, and then he starts screaming it. And the contrast in the transition seamlessly from one to the next, or really make this just so great because it's exactly what goes on in your head. And he captured that. Another thing I love about this album is that there are a lot of adjectives that you can use to just be like a self-hating bondage pig, that you're just like kind of a one note, one tone kind of thing where like that's who you are and like that's your identity. You are this one thing. But what he did, I mean, this album is called The Downward Spiral for a reason because it's a continuous experience emotionally. Like he took all the different flavors of his experience, of whatever he was going through in the moment, and each song is a slightly different flavor of that. It's not just about being the self-hating BDSM guy, like as a novelty. It is that there's a reason for whatever you're going through, and you want to spell out every sort of color of these emotions that you have. Like the extreme, the base, animalistic, sexual, you've got trying to escape from things. You've got trying to talk to somebody who's a bondage pig and telling them that things haven't turned out the way that you want to. You've got the pure sadness of hurting yourself. You've got the whole going through the phases that you go through in a relationship over and over, and how one changes and turns into the next. You've got just straight anger of asking God and cursing him and asking, why do you deserve this? If God is somehow actually okay with your suffering. You know, there's a lot of different levels, emotions, and colors that come with grief that you can go through. It's not just one thing. And I think he really adequately explored that wheel turning. It's not a simple thing, and sometimes, you know, this wheel can turn for years in your life. Like it may seem more overly emotional, overly dramatic, or maybe you're happy and you're not accessing those feelings anymore, or going through those things. But when you are going through something like that, it's so hard to even describe to yourself and to be able to describe it to other people. For example, I went through a breakup of a relationship that lasted almost 7 years. And the period of my life for the next 7 years was so dark. I went through all of these emotions myself. I thought that I was romanticizing my pain. I thought that I was losing my mind. I felt disgust rise up within me all the time, that was burning in my chest and just like grabbing me at the back of my throat. And it changed the way that I looked at life, all of my relationships, and the things that I experienced day to day. I could not separate that experience that I was having from my personality or from what I had become. And so I think if anybody has been through something like that, that's a lot of grief and very hard in that way, it's nice to have somebody artistically to be able to put that into music and words. And it's nice to be able to get that out in that way, because there are a lot of other things that you can do self-destructively instead of like writing music and going into a recording studio and putting that down to tape. You know, like if anybody over the years was offended by some of the things that he said, it's like, well, what would be better? Do you think, you know, turn inward and destroy yourself, or take all that hurt and pain and just be alone in a room and use it creatively? And so this is what we want to do. All right. I'm going to leave this on a positive note and have a little laugh so we can go into the category of cons of this album, if there could be cons. And so the con is a lot of these same sound effects and samples are used in Marilyn Manson's music. Like they're really instantly identifiable when I listen back to it now. Like it's almost like he had the same bank of samples that he just like threw on a lot of their records too. I mean, all of the manipulated animal sounds and even some more of like keyboards that sound sort of like that fluty or organ and stuff. Like Marilyn Manson used all of that too. I mean, maybe he didn't, I'm thinking out loud, like maybe he didn't create these samples completely on his own anyway. They could have been in a bank of stuff, like in whatever he was using, and he just put it on there. But it's like, dude, I mean, you know what you're doing. Like, I know. Obviously, they were on his record label. But like yes, I mean, Trent, you could have manipulated something at least a little freaking more so that it was like slightly less recognizable. Cause you know what you're doing. Cause some of these effects and like sounds are just dead on. They're like exactly the same. This is not a tribute. Anyway, that was just something funny that I noticed that I did not notice at the time back in the day. So, it's all good. All right. So, thank you so much for joining me discussing Pretty Hate Machine and Downward Spiral and a little bit about getting into the constructions and layers of creating electronic music. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed going back and feeling those feelings again and experiencing these albums again. And I just want to say thank you, Trent, for giving us some great music and these sounds that we've taken with us throughout the years. I'm going to explore his newer stuff, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Stay awesome.